Welcome everyone to Deprogrammed on Unsafe Space. This is our special supplementary content from this morning's show. We were hoping to have Gracie West on, but we had technical issues. But she is on now, and so we're going to have the interview about social justice warriors as kind of a cult with her now. So, of course, I have, as always, Keri Smith. Keri, hi.
Hi, guys.
Gracie, welcome.
Hi.
So thanks for joining. Let me just give a little bit of background that I have on you here, if that's okay.
Okay.
So you actually majored in women's studies, and then you have a master's in the sociology of religion. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
And you've been you were in SJW for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when did you leave? When you're part of the walkaway movement, when did you stop being an SJW?
I would say this summer. I mean, I've been being red pilled for about a year, but I didn't really have the courage to admit it or say I've changed and I don't want to be this anymore until the summer, really. Really finally admitting I just don't buy into this anymore, because I had been falling down the rabbit hole of the intellectual dark web and realized I actually don't subscribe to all this stuff any longer. And saying it out loud was hard. It was difficult because I knew that everything would change. Everything, friends, especially my whole community, really, that I had as close friends. They're all still really good people, good Christian people, but they're all social justice warriors.
Now, were you a Christian during your social justice time, or were you an atheist and came back to Christianity, or how would that go?
No, it's something and that's why I'm trying to think through and talk about the cult-like aspect of it, because I maintained my Christianity throughout. I have to say, I don't know if maintained is the right word, but I never lost belief. However, during those years, I didn't exactly connect with God. For 10 years, I didn't go to church. And then when I did go to church, I went to a very liberal SJW Mennonite church, which I didn't grow up in a Mennonite community or church. But, Portland, the Mennonites, I guess they tend to reflect the area that they're in. So they're unlike evangelicals that way, where they can really be so different. Like the ones in Pennsylvania might wear bonnets. I don't know. But they're super different, very different than the ones in Portland, Oregon.
So I grew up Christian also, and I noticed this about the Universal Unitarians or something in San Francisco, that they didn't really seem the same Christian that I grew up with.
Yeah, there's so I'm trying to figure out how people are merging Christianity with this cult-like religion or swapping it out. I'm trying to figure that out, because it's not like I stopped believing in or loving Jesus. I mean, I fell in love with Jesus as a kid, I loved those stories. But I wasn't willing to just toss that out the window. But I have to say that it is just not the same gospel. And I didn't hear that same gospel in that church. And I certainly didn't think about I didn't think about Christianity the same when I was in it.
Sure. I'm really curious about something, which is, it says you've been married for 21 years. You've got 2 kids. Is that right?
Yeah.
Did it affect your marriage? I mean, hey, honey, I'm not an SJW anymore. I assume maybe you didn't start as an SJW with your spouse, because that you've been married for 21 years, but you say you've been an SJW for 15. Did that affect your relationship? What happened?
So it's interesting. My husband and I got married young, of course, and I was 20. He was 22, maybe. And he has 5 college degrees. It's like an AA, BA, 2 MAs, and a PhD. Okay, it's clinical.
Okay.
So the point is, I went to college a little bit later. I first got a license doing hair. And then after that, I decided I want to go to college. So during the time that I was getting a bachelor's degree, 4 years later than my peers, he was getting a master's degree at a seminary, actually. And so we've both always been thinkers, and we've always talked to each other about concepts and things. And I have to say, during that time as well, his dad was dying a slow, miserable death of cancer. And so, you question the goodness of God. You question all these tropes that you hear about God as a conservative evangelical. And so there was plenty of room and reason for him and I both to switch our views from conservatism to liberalism, and especially liberal Christian circles because of seminary. I mean, not everyone who goes through seminary and comes out ends up being a liberal Christian, but plenty do. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. But what I'm trying to say is him and I basically became SJWs around the same time and kind of lived that out. It isn't great for marriage, actually, because...
social justice or the transition?
Well, everything. Nothing's good for marriage. Marriage is hard. But I don't know. I'm not totally sure how to reflect on that. I don't want to say that it totally affected the marriage that much, because frankly, as I started red pilling, he was too, because we started watching the same stuff. Because, you find Jordan Peterson, you're like, oh my gosh, listen to this guy. And then we talk about it. And so by the time we're done talking about it, it's like, oh, and then we find Tim Pool. I mean, we've kind of been on this intellectual journey very similarly, and it's been helpful for marriage, actually. I mean, so
yeah, that makes sense. If you have a good relationship and you're exploring together, then you'll likely arrive at the same conclusions if you're kind of
I wouldn't say we've always landed at the same conclusions, but I think the basic fundamental shifts that have happened in our lives of like leaving conservatism and going into liberalism and then coming back out, those are so foundational that I think if one of us hadn't, we would be having a serious turmoil.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you also just, I think it's worth advertising this to people. You're writing a fiction novel called Breathing in Water, or you've written one. It comes out next year. Is that right?
Yes.
How can people get it, and what's it about? You want to give us some?
Sure. Yeah. So this story was birthed in my head when I was being red pilled. Jordan Peterson once said, or maybe he's said it many times, but it's hard to think. And
sure.
The only way you can really, really think is having two opposing characters or voices in your head. So you have to give space for the devil's advocate in your own head to actually think. And so I don't know if he suggested this or if it was just that I came across that quote of his afterwards, but at some point I recognized I started to put a liberal feminist in conversation with a Southern white man in my head. Okay. So I thought, okay, because nobody in society was talking anymore. They were just throwing labels and accusations. And I thought, I want to hear these conversations and they're not happening. But I have a feeling I could probably put them together. I know this other side, and I definitely know the one I'm in right now. So I put these characters together in my head. I said, okay, what if they were talking about abortion? What would they say? Or what would they say about this and how and why and, that. So at some point I recognized, these people are real in my head. And I started putting them on paper and I realized, I have a little story here. So between January of this year and April, I just wrote the entire thing like a mad woman. Like I was on it every hour that I wasn't working. I worked part-time. So basically, I wrote it's 210 pages. It's a story about a young woman a liberal feminist who's going to Harvard for a graduate degree, and her life is interrupted by family tragedy. She has to go back home to small town Oklahoma, where she has to work with a Southern white man to run her mom's business. So they have to have conversations and they have to work toward a common good. They have to work toward a common goal. And so you have motivation to actually finish conversations. You have motivation to actually land somewhere and not hate each other and throw labels. So I needed that kind of context for them to actually have these conversations. Well, so the story has a twist at the end, but part of the story is their love interest. Eventually, they both kind of realize what it means to be transformed by loving your perceived enemy. And another part of me writing this was thinking, wouldn't it be nice if these polar opposite sides could figure out how to love each other and see the humanity, especially see the humanity in the other person, despite their different opinions. And so the character does kind of red pill along the way, but not fully. So these people don't end up in the same place exactly. But, you know, she does learn a lot, and I think he does too. So that's the story. I don't know if that's too long, but...
No, that's great. How do people just go find it on Amazon or where?
Well, it's in the process. It's in the process of being published right now. I'm going to be putting it through the editing phase. I hope I'm going to independently publish it. So I hope it's available by spring to purchase, and I'll have those accessible on all of my social media. So you can find me Gracie West or Embarrassing Mom. Sometimes, like I think Twitter, I'm at Gracie West or at Read Gracie West. I don't remember now because I don't go to Twitter a lot, honestly.
I think you Read Gracie West on Twitter if I recall.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah, you know better than I do. Facebook, it's Gracie West, and YouTube, it is too. It used to be Embarrassing Mom. That's a long story, and it might be Embarrassing Mom again. I don't know. So.
Well, Embarrassing Mom is. I have a child as well, and so. Embarrassing Mom makes perfect sense, actually.
The story is actually that my son pranked me by changing my profile name in Google, first name Embarrassing, last name Mom. And because, and I changed it back to my name, and he, when I wasn't looking, changed it back. And then Google decided you can't change your name for 90 days, 3 months. Well, that was right before I posted my walkaway video. So like 80,000 people saw my YouTube name is Embarrassing Mom. It was actually a really good prank. I thought that was pretty great.
Yeah, that is good.
But everybody's like, we love your name. Keep Embarrassing Mom. And so I wanted to, but then after the 3 months was up, I thought I don't want to send emails, professional emails with my name looks like Embarrassing Mom. It doesn't show up as Gracie. It shows up as Embarrassing Mom. So like emailing the school and emailing people that might edit my book, it's like, so I thought I could edit only my Google name and not YouTube, but turns out they're married to each other and they will not let you. So so once I changed it back to Gracie West, they don't give me any more chances. I have to wait another 3 months to change it back to Embarrassing. Anyway, long story.
Fair enough. Well, that's a good prank. So, Keri and I earlier I went to what is this? The Cult Education Institute website, and we went through 10 warning signs of a potentially unsafe group. And those were actually pretty straightforward, but the stuff that we didn't get to, that I think you might have some particular insight. I think actually, Keri, you thought there was something in that first 10 list that Gracie would be interested in. So we should do that first. But then there's another list of 10 warning signs regarding people involved with a potentially unsafe group. So I want to go through those with you, Gracie, and just have a conversation about what you think about SJWism as a cult. But Keri, what was it earlier that you said you really wanted to hear Gracie's comments on for the first 10? Do you remember? Do you
can't
hear her?
hear you.
I don't hear her.
I don't hear you.
Okay, so we lost Keri. Possibly because of the Google gods, as Gracie was saying. Bummer, but I guess we're not going to stop, and we'll continue talking about social justice as a cult.
Yeah, so. We're just having two social justice warriors, apostates. So former social justice warriors is just too much of a powerful force for Google to handle. So
yeah,
difficulties all around.
Yeah, I mean, it's dangerous. It's dangerous to get two of you in one spot at the same time. So, so as I was saying earlier, we went through these 10 warning signs of a potentially unsafe group. But there were these 10 warning signs regarding people involved in a group. Like if you have a friend and you're worried about them, like, ooh, is it a cult, or are they in? And just so for your edification, Gracie, when we went through the 10 warning signs of a potentially unsafe group, it turned out that social justice warriorism met every single one. So.
Well, I'm not terribly surprised.
Yeah, we thought, maybe it'll be like 70% or 60%, and we'll be like, ooh, it's almost a cult, but it was 100%. So let's go through the 10 warning signs because it was fun, and I think this would be fun with you. So,
okay,
the number one, extreme obsessiveness regarding the group, resulting in the exclusion of almost every practical consideration. I'm not sure I would agree with that with social justice warriors, but what do you think? Are they? Is it like, is their whole life revolve around social justice and they kind of give up practical considerations, or not?
Oh, I wouldn't say that, but
I would say that's not true. Also,
no, I would say that's not true. Yeah, it might permeate every aspect of their life, but I wouldn't say that they give up practical parts of life for it.
Okay, so this is the first one they haven't met. This is good. So okay. Number 2, individual identity, the group, or leader and or God, depending. We don't have that in this situation. As distinct and separate categories of existence become increasingly blurred. Instead, in the follower's mind, these identities become substantially and increasingly fused as that person's involvement with the group continues and deepens. So I think what they're meaning by this is... a
loss of personal identity?
It sounds like it in like the group and a kind of moral authority are kind of the same thing, and it's there's no it looks like they're saying there's no distinction between kind of the idea of a god or this moral authority and what the leader or the group wants, and the deeper you get, the more that seems to be the case.
Well, I would say that the moral authority is the all-important aspect, so it does permeate all of your life. I don't know if people lose their personal identity. I mean, okay, can you read that again, the beginning of it?
It's confusing. Yeah, I will read it again.
Yeah. Individual
identity. So actually, I'm going to just read it. I'm going to read it for word because they use the word leader and / group sometimes when they talk about these things. So it says individual identity, the group, the leader and or God, as distinct and separate categories of existence, become increasingly blurred.
Okay. So like a person's individual identity is blurred with this
group
identity.
Yes.
Well, I don't know if they're actually aiming at this, but I would definitely say that individual identity is lost and the group identity takes over your personal identity. So you're now placed in the hierarchy of groups. And so, you're part of a collective, you represent a collective of sorts, but yeah, so you're not allowed to be an individual for sure. So you lose that individual aspect, definitely. I don't know if that's exactly what they're getting at, but
it's hard to tell. Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely lose your individual identity for the sake of the group.
Now,
yeah.
So this means like you weren't Gracie, you were a white lady. Is that?
Yeah, okay. Exactly. Right. So as a white lady, if I were still a social justice warrior, and by the way, it's not lady, it's woman.
Sorry, is it woman with a Y or an X?
I don't know. I've skipped that. I've been out of school for 15 years. It's probably a Y. I don't know. But yeah, they basically, if I were a social justice warrior right now, I would have to do penance for my white femaleness because of the fact that an article came out in the Huffington Post about half of white women voting for one of two candidates. So that's a terrible percentage. Half of a population voting for one of two candidates.
Yeah,
it should be all of them.
Yeah,
because
I think
it's not representing, right?
Evil. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Incidentally enough, I believe the entire management team and board on the Huffington Post is white women, something like that. It's a pretty it's the liberal white woman monoculture over there at Huffington Post.
Well, and they have to do penance for their white guilt, and there's something very self-hating about it. You definitely have to pick on yourself when you don't embody the top of the hierarchy.
Sure. Sure. Okay, so that seems like it'll get a check. Like, you definitely losing individual identity in some respects. Number 3 is whenever the group/leader is criticized or questioned, it is characterized as persecution.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Just like Keri was saying earlier with posting something online, it's not just an opinion, it's an attack. So if you question their orthodoxy, you have actually attacked their foundation of their morality, therefore you represent evil. It's very cut and dry. Yeah, okay. I would absolutely say they passed that one.
Alrighty. So 2 out of 3 so far. Okay, number 4, uncharacteristically stilted and seemingly programmed conversation and mannerisms. Cloning of the group in personal behavior. I don't know if I see a lot of that, but maybe. You tell me.
Yeah, I don't know about behavior, but...
I feel like language and mannerisms, there's a lot of cloning.
Well, there's definitely cloning in the ideology and thinking. So you have to think and talk the same. In other words, if you have a conversation with an SJW, it would go the same as if you had it with that SJW over there. This one or that one, the conversation would go the same.
So they're fungible.
They would say the same things in response to the things that you're saying.
Okay.
So it is...
They would all be offended by the NPC meme.
Yeah. Well, they'll find a way to make it a racist thing, I'm sure, if they haven't already.
Sure.
But yeah, very much like that. And then, they are kind of getting into that embodied thing more, controlling people's body a little more. Like, here's an example. You're not supposed to, if you're white and you're talking to a group of people of color, you're not supposed to move your hands. If you,
so
especially
like if you're Italian, you're screwed.
Yeah, exactly. And so, especially if you're a white man, or white women too. But if you're
start doing jazz hands while I talk to people.
So if you want to see an example of this, look up Evergreen College protests when the president is trying to say something in response to their demands for whatever it is. This mob of students took over campus and took the president hostage and demanded things from him. And so he was responding to that, and he was using his hands, and they told him to put his arms down by his side because he was being threatening. And he was just talking, like this, but he wasn't even being defensive. He was being very, he was conceding. Wow. But yeah, so they're getting much more controlling of your body, and, like you're not supposed to touch black people's hair. I think that's kind of like,
Aren't you not supposed to touch people's hair generally if you don't know them?
Right. Right. But because they have a different texture, black women find that people love to touch their hair, especially white women. And so there's these rules that they create about how those things are bad and here's why. And
don't appreciate aspects of me that are different from you because that's offensive or something.
Yeah. And I get it. Like it is kind of dumb and rude to touch people. Like when I was pregnant, I found that a lot of people would touch my belly, and I want to do that too when I see pregnant women, but I realized it does feel as a pregnant woman like they're touching you, not the baby, and so it's a little awkward.
Well, especially they are actually touching you.
Yeah.
It would be more awkward if they were touching the baby, but that's another story.
Right.
So, interesting. So, had I known all of this, I would have much more vehemently accused Jim Acosta of assault and he did mistakenly kind of brush against the intern. So I guess, especially because he's a white man, he was assaulted.
Oh yeah, right. But because she is guilty of wrongthink, it doesn't matter. She's an apostate.
I see. So we can touch your hair all we want.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's next time if I meet you in person. I'll be sure to remember that. Okay. So we would say kind of on that one.
Yeah.
I just want to reread it for uncharacteristically stilted and seemingly programmed conversation and mannerisms. I mean, that first part really does resonate with me. The cloning of the behavior maybe not quite as much.
It's getting there with the low class groups.
Yeah. Okay. Number 5, dependency upon the group/leader for problem solving, solutions, and definitions without meaningful reflective thought. A seemingly inability to think independently or analyze situations without group involvement. Well, I mean, I wasn't in it, but I certainly feel like presented with some new problem, the first thing a social justice warrior does is look around to see what everyone else in the group thinks that they should say if it's not clear.
Well, yeah, there's definitely some people's voice is more authoritative than other people's. So if you're one of the groups at the top of their hierarchy, then what you say goes. And so it really depends on who's talking.
Oh,
and
okay.
When problems come up, it depends on who's speaking. So here's how you break it down. I could go through the hierarchy, but
actually, can you? Because
Sure.
I was just going to ask, what's the hierarchy? Is it written down? Is it you posted on the wall at campus? What's the hierarchy?
Well, the hierarchy is race matters. So dark skin pigmentation is at the top of privilege in their hierarchy. Okay. So dark skin pigmentation, then kind of medium, and then ethnic, historically colonized ethnic groups are next, and then after that is trans women and men, and so what's happening after that is white women, and then after that is like maybe disabled folks, and then after that is, well, you get down all the way down to men, and then white skin. So obviously people kind of and homosexuals, they would end up below trans but above women, especially white ones.
Is it static, or does it change, or does this?
It'll change, yeah. Like gay and lesbian, LGBT, Q. They used to be up higher on the list, and trans people weren't even on there, except for LGBT. T is part of the T, but trans have sort of become their own separate group, as in they're the most protected that we're advocating for right now. So they're almost a separate thing right now. But yeah, it changes a little. But race somehow doesn't change. It's mostly going to stay at the top of the hierarchy. Well, dark skin, I should say, not race. The darker the skin, the more privilege or authority you have with speech. And that is because I suspect it has something to do with how they arrange their moral code. And shaming is always part of religion, right? You have to have morals. And when people break the morals, you shame them, or you just shame them to keep them in the group or something. Mm-hmm. So what happens is you can use historical things like slavery, with the fact that women didn't get to vote until 1920. I mean, you can use these hard evidence things as shaming tools. And so I think that those things are going to, especially skin color, because slavery was the worst, that'll stay at the top, I imagine. But
so I have a challenge to this / a question, because I am an outsider on this. I feel like it's really attacking people who have guilt and resources more than anything else, and so like I almost look at it inverted. And the reason I'm saying that is, white males in society typically, or at least historically, have had more resources, and Judeo-Christian ethic is certainly more vulnerable to guilt than, say, the Muslim ethic, or even you go to Japan or China. My wife's Chinese. She's like totally confused when people feel guilty about stuff they didn't do. It's just not part of her culture. But what I've started to see happen is, you mentioned skin pigmentation at the kind of the top of the hierarchy, right? Mm-hmm. Asians in the Bay Area are starting to get vilified. There was someone at Berkeley the other day that with Asian silence is violence. That was the sign they were holding up. And it's because Asians have a lot of resources. They've done very well coming to America. And they've actually outperformed whites. And so I feel like it's just this, well, they have more resources. Maybe we can vilify them. And the pyramid's partly about victims, but partly just about, who can we trash, right? Yeah,
well, they would include Jews and Asian people as white now. I mean,
oh, I see.
They do too well. And and it has to do with pigmentation. Think about it. They don't have really dark pigmentation. So they do naturally fall at the bottom, toward the bottom of the...
Sure, but they have about the same pigmentation as Hispanics or Latinos, right? Some of them.
Yeah, I don't know. But I think it definitely, you're right. It has to do with resources and wealth, and they do too well. They work too hard. It doesn't work for their narrative, because the idea is if you have a race other than Caucasian, then you are oppressed, and it's intentional, and people are working against you. And so when they see people defy those truths, communities of people that just excel, it doesn't fit. And that they'll drop right off. They'll aim their target at it, because at the end of the day, it is about resources. I think that's why Marxism was so attractive to the ideology, and how it kind of latched onto that and developed from that, because there's this whole critique of access to resources, and they just kind of threw class in the garbage in terms of their oppressor versus oppressed. They aren't talking class anymore.
Working class work. Versus, I mean, they stopped talking about it because it wasn't working, right?
It didn't work, but they could look at groups of people in different ways and just make huge claims about them in general. And then, but yeah, that doesn't work when you talk about Jews and Asians. And I think it's really interesting that in SJW culture, you are required to hate Israel. I was listening to a Jewish rabbi speaking. I have to find him. I need to listen to him more, but he was saying, historically, Jews were hated because of their race or religion, actually. And then it became not a good thing to hate people for religion. Then they were hated for their race, and it became not a good thing to hate people for their race. But now they're hated for their country, their state, their nation. And he said it's really the newest form of anti-Semitism. Because if you ask an SJW, do you think it's appropriate to critique the British government? They would say, absolutely, yes. And you would say, do you think they don't have a right to exist? And they would go, well, no. But they would never say that for Israel.
Huh.
And, the idea is that Israel has colonized Palestine, but it's like, who hasn't colonized the place they were?
Right.
And I'm not saying Israel has. I mean, it has this whole tradition of that's been their homeland. So that's a whole different issue. But my point is, if you're an SJW, this one narrative gets handed to you. And I think it's telling. And I don't think it's random that SJWs absolutely hate and work against the state of Israel. I don't think it's random.
So I agree with you. I don't think it's random. And it's striking to me because they're also very sensitive to what they perceive as anti-Semitism in the U.S., right? Rightly. I mean, I'm not an anti-Semite. I actually have Jewish blood. But, they're very, very worried about anti-Semitism in the U.S., but when it comes to Jews in Israel, it's all about hating them.
I don't even think they're that supportive of anti-Semitism here, honestly. I think whenever they see any kind of hate at all, they're like, oh, and they call it out and see, that's proof. And I think they use examples of anti-Semitism as like, see, look at how bad we are, shame on us. But I have not seen a lot of care about that.
Huh.
I don't know.
Oh,
but that's my take.
I mean, I have another theory about why Israel's hated, which is I really think a lot of the philosophy behind the movement is partially just postmodernism, but there's also a really deep strain of nihilism. And frankly, you hate Israel because if you're nihilist, right, you hate the good for being the good, right? You hate progress for being progress. And frankly, as much as you might want to complain about Israel or you say that they do bad things, which I don't, I think they're actually pretty good. But compared to the surrounding nations, they are the most free and the most just society compared to all of their neighbors. Yeah. So they're hated actually for their virtue.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't understand how they can hate the only democracy in the Middle East.
Right.
Well, I guess I can understand because they don't like capitalism and they would rather everybody was just socialist, but they like to put that word democratic in front of it.
Right.
But
well, yeah, I just went through Ocasio-Cortez's platform, and some of it's just outright communist. I mean, I hate to use the word communist because it sounds over the top, but when you look at some of this stuff, it's like that's kind of communism.
Yeah, it's not over top at all. I had professors in my women's studies classes outright say that socialism was better. Communism might be too. That was 15 years ago. I would put money on the fact that they're actually just outright saying it now.
Well, I will say, so I have read the Antifa handbook, and I will say that they do explicitly embrace Marxism, and you're basically an Antifa ally and a brother only if you support some form of Marxist ideology. So you can say, well, I want socialism. I don't know how that's very different than communism in their eyes, because their version of socialism is not like a large government. It's like socialism, like Venezuela socialism. But yeah, I mean, I think they pretty much are, and their view of their definition of a fascist is anyone who's not a Marxist. So that includes capitalists, as you mentioned, the hatred of Israel for being capitalist.
Yeah.
So
yeah. The one thing Antifa has in common is that they hate capitalism. So, but here's the thing: the only way to get rid of capitalism is to totally demolish society.
Right.
And they know that, and that's why they go out into the streets, and they want blood in the streets. They want revolution. If you read the material, if you listen to anything, articles they post, it says revolution. It says,
oh yeah,
they don't like Democrats.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The Antifa handbook is, I often find in life that people that you meet are usually, they usually tell you the truth about them right away if you're listening. Often we're not listening, right? But I think that Antifa, they're not hiding a damn thing. You read their handbook, and they're very clear about what they want, and it's violent, and it's violent revolution.
Yeah, and it's led by professors. They are getting people to believe that this is what needs to happen, and they even suggest that sometimes the best way to get to an equal society. I mean, sometimes you have to actually sacrifice your comfort, and I mean, sometimes you got to
send people to Siberia. I mean, if you really, you may have to kill 100 million people to make an omelet, but
well, they would say that never happened, or that wasn't socialism.
Yes, no, I noticed that it's that's awfully convenient, but every socialist government in history doesn't count. So
right, because they would do it better. They would do it right.
Yeah, the arrogance. We could do a whole show on the arrogance of Marxism and socialism generally. So let's. We kind of veered off track, but it was a fun conversation. But let's get back to the warning signs here. Let's see. We did that one. So that was 4. So number 5 is dependency upon the group for problem-solving solutions and definitions. Oh, we did that one without. So we did that. Okay, great. So that was a check. So we've done 5. So number 6, hyperactivity centered on the group agenda, which seems to supersede any personal goals or individual interests. I don't know. Tell me about that one. I don't know if that's true.
I don't know. I mean, if you're deep into the cult, then I mean, if you're Antifa, that would be true. But I think that would have to be the most extreme end of this movement, this cult-like following. If you're just trained in college to think like an SJW and go out into the world, it's not totally like that, but it is in terms of virtue signaling on social media. So the things you post, I mean, you're kind of like this little Facebook warrior or Twitter warrior, because you put out there all the things that you're supposed to care about, but I'm sure that they're going about their own lives and doing their own things. So I'm not totally sure if that one qualifies.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they all wear potato sacks and, have subsistence living so that they can devote all of their money and energy to...
Yeah, I think that one probably doesn't check the box.
Yeah, okay. So we're, 2 down. Actually, two didn't pass yet. Number 7, a dramatic loss of spontaneity and sense of humor. That's the one that to me is it's tautological almost. It's like,
that's laughable to even ask. It's like, that's funny asking. Do they have a sense of humor? It's like, let's just laugh. We don't have to answer that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. We could just
they don't have a sense of humor at all.
Go watch modern comedy and late night television, and you can answer that question for yourself.
Okay, so I read a post that I wrote. I was looking actually through my feed on Facebook trying to find when it was that I said, I'm pretty sure we're headed for civil war. Okay. And so I went through my feed, and I went way back, and I went, it must have been last year. how far back was it before I really red pilled? So I started looking at my feed, and I was just disgusted by my Facebook feed. And I thought, if any one of my friends at this point posted that, I would just be rolling my eyes and gagging, and like I was the one doing this, okay? And it just, what was I saying? I was bragging because someone had told me a joke and it wasn't funny.
Oh, that's not funny.
Right. Yeah. He thought he was being funny, and I was like, no, that was not funny. And I just was like, ew. I'm not just not laughing. I'm virtue signaling about the fact that I'm not laughing. It's disgusting.
Yeah. It's like, an Irish guy, a Catholic, and a Jew walk into a "fuck you." How dare you? Yeah. Don't tell those jokes. Yeah. It generally, like I said, you watch late night comedy, you get clapping instead of laughs. That's the key. That's the telltale sign, right? So, all right. So that one's clear. Number 8, increasing isolation from family and old friends unless they demonstrate an interest in the group.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not like they're all meeting together, but they absolutely isolate you. I have the majority of my dearest friends just aren't talking to me. And it's just the silent treatment. I think if they weren't Christians, they would outright say, you're just a racist, bigot, awful, homophobe, all the things, Nazi, all the words, because I've already been associated with someone like Gavin McGinnis by going on his show. I just realized the lighting in here is getting dark. I'm going to try plugging in this light if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah. Let's just take a break and do that.
Yeah. All right, is that better?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it wasn't that bad before. Let me actually, since we're pausing now, I'm going to fix something else that is fine, but I don't like it. So. Okay.
Well, now it's going to change the video, so I feel bad, but
That's right. Okay,
it was getting dark, and I was using daylight.
Okay. Okay, number 9. Anything the group does can be justified no matter how harsh or harmful. To me, that's also true. You tell me, social justice expert.
It's getting there. I would say Antifa, definitely. It's by any means necessary is one of their sayings.
There's a group called By Any Means Necessary in Berkeley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So any means necessary to accomplish their end because it's in the name of justice. So it makes it okay. I think increasingly it is the memes that are going through social media and the certain kinds of friends of mine that are willing to share really surprises me because it's stuff that's like, that's agitating for that type of attitude, that's saying things like, yeah, silence is contributing to the death and the mutilation or whatever it is, like these really extreme. So in other words, and they're saying, if we continue to be silent, if we continue to not do something, and it's kind of like agitating. And I'm thinking, these are people who aren't normally like this. This sounds like something that Antifa would post. Like if we don't go out there and do something right now, everything is like we're actually contributing to the concentration camps at the border. And it's like, that's a serious accusation. First, that we have concentration camps. And by the way, that's a complete insult to every Jewish family who had anybody in a concentration camp. I can't even believe, like if I were a Jewish person right now, I don't think I could tolerate those type of friends if they said that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think it's getting there. It's interesting to see what people are pushing forward, what kind of people are pushing forward that type of agitation. I think it's increasing.
I certainly see it in terms of language, right? I see it's okay to call anyone anything, and as long as it shuts them down, as long as you do the damage that you want, because mostly, almost all of their actions and speech are about damage to someone in some way. It's very little of it is about anything positive. It's almost always about destruction of something or someone that they view as problematic.
Yeah, if you listen to feminists do speeches, they will tell you what they want, and what they want is the deconstruction of what exists. What they want is to demolish the values that exist. I have quotes. I can
So they're
send you a video.
nihilists.
Yeah. So it's deconstruct, demolish, all of these words that are basically like, what do we want? It's not, I want to create a better society. It's not, I have a plan. It's not, I have an idea. The what they want and what they will explicitly say that they want is to take down the patriarch or whatever they see that exists right now.
Right.
Yeah.
If we all starve equally, that's better than some people, having more food than others, it seems like.
Mm-hmm.
Right, yeah. All right, well, yeah, I would give them credit for that one. I do think that they have that attitude. And number 10, former followers are at best considered negative or worse, evil and under bad influences. They cannot be trusted and personal contact is avoided. You just talked about that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just 100% yes. Check that box.
Okay, so I think we got an 8 out of 10 on these warning signs, and we got a 10 out of 10 on when just analyzing the group and not analyzing people involved. So I think social justice culture is doing pretty well on the cult.
Doing pretty well, becoming a cult.
Yeah.
Right?
I would say they're not becoming a cult. They're done. They're a cult. They could get more. They could get crazier. They could all drink Kool-Aid and wait for some comet to pick them up. But other than that, I think they're there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're there, and you can feel it when you're leaving it. You do feel it because the isolation and man, that's a really bright light. Sorry, I tried to change the lighting, and it's just like super bright.
That's all right. It's what, the production quality is actually quite low. Okay, it's the content that matters here, so it's okay.
Of course. Anyway, you feel it. It's a tangible isolation. It's excommunication, and it's a really cruel way to punish somebody because what you withhold from them is human contact and love and acceptance. But underlying that is this assumption that you actually are not only being influenced by evil, but you are actually becoming it. And it's a really cruel. You feel it when you exit. I can identify with people who have left a cult because you realize how controlled your mind was. I always used to know what to think about things because of the group pyramid of who's in charge of knowledge. So in this situation, these people are arguing and I know who's right because of the color of skin or whatever. And Israel, Palestine, I don't need to know the details, just Israel, bad, right. Palestine's good.
Yeah.
Very simple. So when you come out, you're like, oh my goodness, I have to learn what I think about things. And I actually have to think, about the issues in detail and give both sides a chance. It's work. It's a lot of work.
No, I agree. And actually, I'm sure we all have shortcuts to really thinking about problems in some areas of our lives. But, the more that I focus on trying to really think things through, the more I realize I'm actually unsure on a lot more than I was unsure about before. Mm-hmm. And I'm maybe sure that one of the extremes is dumb, but I find a lot of cases where I'm like, well, that makes no sense, and this makes no sense. Mm-hmm. But actually, I'm not sure we know where the line is in between those things, and that's a really interesting discussion, and maybe we should have it.
Yeah, that's what I'm finding too. I feel the same way. Yeah. I actually don't trust myself anymore.
That's
when you
healthy,
live,
though, I think, right?
I guess so. It's probably a good thing, but when you live for so long, so confident that I wouldn't say I thought I knew everything, but I knew how to think about everything.
Right.
And I knew, I just knew, and I knew I would never, ever change. It was religious in nature. I just knew someday my sister would hear me about feminism and she would say, "You're right, I hear you finally." And I really thought that. And I never, even if she never came around, I never imagined that I wouldn't think that. Yeah. So the fact that I don't think feminism is helping society and it's detrimental, actually, the fact that I don't think that anymore, it kind of makes me not trust myself, because how could I be pushing it so hard and then suddenly I don't think it's good,
Yeah. So the way that I think about it is something that hasn't changed about me in 25 years now. It's not dedication to particular beliefs or particular conclusions. it's dedication to a process of like, you know, this is the process. I'm going to use reason. I'm going to use like this. This is the. I'm going to use evidence. I'm going to ask a question. Like, this is the process, and sometimes the process will take me places that I don't want to go, but I'm committing to the process. And sometimes the process leaves me at a fork in the road, and I'm like, I don't know where to go from here. That's okay. But it's in some sense, it's more scary because I don't always immediately know what to think about things. But in another case, it's comforting because I don't feel like I have to know. And I feel like, oh, we can have a conversation. And if you convince me or bring data that I don't know or an argument I haven't heard, it's okay for me to change my mind and be like, oh, actually, you're totally right about that. And I'm not being a hypocrite. I'm committed to a process, and that process has led me somewhere else.
Yeah. So it's similar to being part of a fundamentalist religion where they say things like, if you question this, you're not a Christian, and you know what that means.
Yeah.
You're going to burn in hell for eternity. And that's scary. It's like, oh no,
Absolutely.
And so that's the difference between a fundamentalist religion and one that says, God knows your heart. God knows that people doubt. God knows these things. It's not like suddenly you're on your way to hell. You know, it's like there's different kinds of faith. Yeah. And so I just don't know if you can be a social justice warrior and not become cultish about it. You know?
I mean, I don't think so, because they kick you out if you're not cultish. I mean, if you know, but
because that's how it started with me. I started to question, and when I verbalized my questions, I didn't think it would be as bad as it was. Like, people just couldn't handle it. Yeah. They couldn't handle it. They would shut down the conversation. My dearest friends would say, I can't. I have so much on my plate, and it's so stressing me out. And they couldn't deal with my transformation. Even just, well, what if identity politics is not good? And it's like, we can't even do it.
Don't go there. I don't. What would the phrase Keri said the other day? I don't have enough spoons to deal. I don't even know what that means, but it sounded like spoons are some measurement of emotional energy, I guess.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that one, but yeah.
But yeah, you mentioned something. I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian household, and one of the things that actually had a big impact on me is one of the things that they said, and I think I've heard social justice culture say similar things. I was told that you don't ever read anything that might make you question any of your beliefs that we've taught you. And if you start to see that something is going that direction, it's Satan has written it, and you can't read it. It will corrupt your mind. And so I actually put down books that I remember. Like, there were books that I would start to read and be like, this is evil. I can't hear this perspective. And it took me a while to get to the point where I realized if my faith is so fragile that it can't survive this book, we've got another problem altogether. Yeah. And I feel like the same thing happens with social justice warriors, where if they hear about a source, like, for example, if you say, I read an article on Breitbart the other day, okay? Breitbart is a right-leaning outlet. Maybe some of the stuff I don't read it a lot, but maybe some of the stuff is wrong. I don't know.
No, it's alt-right, and that means white supremacist, and that means KKK. Didn't you know this?
Right. So, but that's exactly the response. It's like, well, the source is X. It's the genetic fallacy in logic, right? Well, look who's saying it, therefore it's wrong.
Well, it's coming from the source, the evil one. It's coming from them, even if it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. It might say that it does. It might say it likes everyone. It might say it's not a white supremacist. It might say that it's not all this, but it is. Yeah. And you're like, okay, what happened to letting people have agency over who they are and actually believing people what they say? It doesn't exist in that cult.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it reminds me, I don't remember which philosopher this is. I wish I should look it up, but it might have been Nietzsche or someone. But they said, if an inmate leans out the window from an insane asylum and yells 2 + 2 is 4, that doesn't make him wrong. Like, it doesn't matter who says it, right? Yeah. It's still true.
Yeah.
So, but that's not the attitude of social justice culture. I think it's this genetic fallacy. Look at the source, Nazi, KKK, whatever. Therefore, don't believe anything, right?
Yeah. Part of it is, how do you know what you know? Part of it is, so truth. Is there truth? Is there such a thing as truth? And it's relative. And what is it relative to? And the only real truth is the hierarchy they've built. So
Right.
if an insane asylum guy leans out and says something factually correct, that doesn't mean it's factually correct, or it doesn't mean that it doesn't even, like, the fact that it's factually correct is not the point. They don't care about that.
Right. There aren't, and well, I mean, they've coined the term hate facts, which just makes no sense to me as a
hate
facts don't have emotions attached to them. They're just statements about reality that correspond accurately with reality.
Oh my God, I haven't heard that one.
You haven't? Oh, it's a good one.
It's like the more ridiculous they get, I always think they're going to look at it and go, okay, I see it now. I hear it now.
Right. Oh,
now
hate facts. That is stupid.
Right, but they don't.
No.
They don't. The more you push and go, isn't that weird that you like made someone cry and then you called her fragile?
Right.
They don't hear it.
Right.
They can't see it.
Yeah. It's
weird.
it is disturbing. And so, I don't know. I lost my train of thought, but the hate facts thing is just, it's an example to me of this kind of, oh, I know what I was going to say. Ayn Rand actually talked about this concept of a social metaphysician, and I love the phrase and I love the meaning of it. It's this idea that so metaphysics obviously is the branch of philosophy where we're talking about what is actually real and what's not real, right? Mm-hmm. And a social metaphysician is someone who doesn't look out with their own eyes and their own sense data and evaluate with their own judgment about what's real. They look around socially and they look at consensus, and whatever consensus is, that's true. The fact is whatever consensus is, and I see that a lot in, I don't know if it's social justice culture per se. I see that a lot in culture, but I definitely see it in social justice culture where maybe they're looking around and trying to figure out where that person is on the hierarchy before they accept it. But there's definitely this attitude of like, well, I can't independently evaluate this because I got to check in with the peeps.
Oh, right? Totally. Right. Because maybe I can't speak for them because they're of color. And so, but it's like, but you always speak for them. Right. It's interesting to watch a white SJW man have a conversation with Candace Owens, black conservative female,
who they hate. I mean, they hate her. Talk about hating someone. If you're a black female, I guess if she was trans and disabled, it would be worse. But if you're a black female and you're on the other side, I think they hate her more than they would hate someone like me or you.
Well, actually, yeah, she fell from grace a lot farther because she's way up on the hierarchy. She is like clergy, unless she's an apostate, and then she's like the devil.
Right, yeah.
So,
yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry, continue with your Candace Owens.
Oh, it's just interesting watching a white man, SJW, have an angry conversation with Candace Owens, black conservative female, because they are telling her all of this stuff. They're yelling at her. And they're like, black women need blah, blah, blah about how they need all of this protection and you're awful. And you're just like, wait a minute, wait a second.
Wait, you're allowed to speak for me now? Yeah.
Right. And she'll say like, I can speak for myself or something, but they can't hear it.
No.
They can't hear it.
No.
Because she's not a black woman. She's an apostate.
Right. Right.
So they're not actually talking about her.
Right.
They're talking about believers.
Yeah. No,
yeah,
it's
really interesting to watch those conversations.
Yeah. It's telling to see how they treat people who would be at the top of their hierarchy but are wrong thinkers. Mm-hmm. And I mean, Keri West is another example of, I'm sure I don't agree with Keri West on a whole bunch of stuff, but he didn't have to say much to be really vilified by them. Just like, here's my Trump hat, and it's like, oh my God, he's horrible. He's, make fun of mental illness and all this kind of stuff.
I know. It's like, you guys would never, I can't believe CNN let them say the things they said.
Yeah.
I can't believe they let them get away with that.
Sure.
I don't care what color you are. I don't think it's appropriate to be saying a Negro who can't read.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Seriously?
And laughing about it, and it was just this like, yeah. I mean,
it's like, but it does matter what color they are when they say it. And that's the thing about SJW is as long as they say it, it's okay, or it's right. It's actually true.
Yeah.
It's not just okay. It's actually true.
Yeah. Because the right people said it.
Yeah. The right people said it.
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to keep you for too long, but this has been super fun. I know, you know, I'm most intrigued that you have a degree in feminism.
Right.
Can you?
Yeah.
This could probably be a separate show, but just really from a high level, are you still? Do you consider yourself a feminist in any way? Are you just like anti-third wave feminism, or are you just like screw all feminism? Like, what's your position now?
No way. I'm not a feminist at all.
Okay.
I've decided to, because I feel like feminists, first of all, that's a label that was created during a time of women activism that I just loathe. And earlier women who tried to get the vote they were called suffragettes, suffragettes.
Right, there's a different term. Yeah.
Right. And what I want to do is not read history the way they read it, because first of all, they're wrong. And when you look back at history, you have to understand that men and women have negotiated over time, and it had a lot to do with biology, because women were really constrained by the fact that they didn't have birth control, so they kept having babies. And of course they weren't out in society building bridges and creating airplanes and doing all these things, because they were pregnant
Right.
and taking care of children. Right. So you can't lay the whole sum total of history at the feet of men and say, you suck. Because the fact is, they created birth control. They gave you a reason. They gave you a way to exit whatever it is that you're personally discontent with.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I refuse to pick that label up any longer. I now see it as it's a tool, it's a political angle, and it doesn't mean that women haven't had to work hard in the past to change biases, but I would never attach myself to that label again. I was just watching this thing about the grooming gangs, the Muslim grooming gangs
in the UK,
rape gangs and stuff. And they would say, if this woman is not covering herself, then she's available for whatever I want.
Right.
And so there's this attitude, but it's not like...
Well, feminists don't care about that, though, by the way.
No, they don't care about that at all. The only thing they care about is that you don't say anything bad about those men.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
But yeah, it's like those women in those countries and cultures have a lot of work to do to overcome a lot of biases and hatred and violence, and so it's not like gender trouble doesn't exist in the world or never has.
Sure.
And it doesn't mean it didn't ever exist here, and it doesn't. But what I hate is the lack of gratitude. I hate the lack of looking at what they have and actually seeing it for what it is, which is an incredibly progressive country of men who respect them as long as they're respectable, which these ones aren't, these feminists aren't, but they give them respect.
Yeah.
And there's no gratitude. There's no gratitude for either the history of women actually working for change. There's no gratitude at all. It's just always a complaint, and always like, oh, men are just like this and that. It's like, no, they're not actually. And they're not that way, especially more and more every day in Western societies. And so no way, I will never use that label again.
Well, I think one of the things that really bothers me a lot about feminism is the hatred of mothers who choose to just stay home and be moms. And this is just a personal passion of mine, is how we treat children in society. I think if you're going to look at any marginalized or unprotected class of humans, children are the last completely unprotected class of humans. No one really cares. If you're a woman and you're in a relationship with a guy and he beats you, you can leave, but you can't if you're a kid. I mean, even if you could, what, they're going to take your parent to jail, and then you lose your parent and your source of resources. I mean, it's the power dynamic between children and parents is the largest it could possibly be. And I really believe that the role of a good mother, it could be a father who's home, but usually it's a mother, and the role of a good mom who's there raising her children to be responsible adults and teaching them right from wrong and giving them the support and the love they need, and not beating them and doing all the right things is invaluable. And the truth is, if you're in a marriage where the man goes and works and the mom stays home with the kids, that's not to criticize her for not having a job, or to think look down on her for not having a quote job that she goes out and gets paid for, is ridiculous. This is a trade. The man needs her desperately to be taking care of the household and taking care of the kids, and in return he goes and slogs away in the mines or whatever he's doing and brings a paycheck home. And I get that that's not the dynamic that every couple necessarily wants, but there is nothing wrong with that dynamic. In fact, it's a very healthy dynamic. And if more kids had moms who stayed home and raised them, I think we would have a much better culture, because they wouldn't raise up as traumatized as they wouldn't grow up as traumatized as they seem to be growing up. And
well, they're being raised by institutions, and this is actually a model of socialism and communism. If you look at the documentaries historically, they do talk explicitly about how the state should be raising the children, and the women should be working for the community.
Right.
And feminists kind of do this thing where they say women should not be working for this one man,
right.
And it's like, oh, what should she be doing? Working for the entire community?
Right.
Right. It's not a better gig. And, they have this argument of like, oh, if you're economically dependent, you're at risk. And it's like, that's true. You could be at risk for if you have a bad partner situation. But
so choose well and be a good partner yourself.
Choose well. There's also all of these services that feminists have created, and shelters and stuff. And I don't know.
I feel like we could have a whole separate show about parenting and feminism.
I agree, though. I agree.
So maybe we'll do that.
Yeah. Children definitely need a better environment. And what they're doing right now is just raising them in school. The feminists are going to care about children, and they kind of increasingly are, but this is the only thing they care about is right think. So they're infiltrating curriculum and health education.
Yeah, I would say that that's not because they care about children. It's because they people like my daughter, she's 9. She's inoculated. I mean, there's I think that I could get hit by a bus tomorrow, and there's not really much that they could do to her at this point in her life where she's going to become a social justice warrior. She knows how to think. She knows how to evaluate things and independently think. That's what they're afraid of.
Oh, totally. Yeah, my daughter's 9 too, and my son is going to be 11 this month. We have conversations at the dinner table every night, and often you'll find me saying, well, here's something you won't hear at school.
Right, yes.
Here's something they won't tell you at school.
Yeah.
And so they've actually seen me red pill, because when Trump became president, I took my kids out to dinner the night of the election, telling them that history was going to be made, that the first female president was going to be elected.
How'd that go? History was made, but not in the way you thought.
I know. And we just they were watching this TV in this bar and grill place, and we could not admit it. Matt and I were just quiet, and the kids kept looking up at the TV going, hey, it looks like Trump's winning. And we're like, shh.
Don't say that.
So they've seen us, because after a while, when they were like, oh, Trump this or that, we were like, okay, we're going to have a talk about this. We don't really know how we feel about Trump. We told you he was this hot, awful, horrible human being that hated Mexicans, but we don't think that anymore.
Right.
So we had to backtrack, and we've had some interesting, good conversations with our kids going, now they know how to think. Now they realize that mom used to call herself a feminist, but she doesn't, and here's why. And when I teach my children, I tell them, here's what someone thinks, here's why. They think that they're doing the right thing. They think that they're doing the right thing because of this idea. And then I tell them how I think and why I think the way that they are looking at it is incorrect. So I try to be the devil's advocate in their head.
Yeah.
No,
I think I seriously want to have you back just to talk about child rearing, because
that'd be great.
It's a topic that I think is ignored, except for people who want to indoctrinate children. They're the only ones talking about it, and I think it could just be a fascinating discussion. So
yeah.
I want to let you go here, but anything else on social justice generally as a cult that you really feel like we didn't touch on that you want to really talk about, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay. Well, I'm just kind of writing out actually the basic doctrines that if you cross the line, it's heretical. Mm-hmm. And so some of the doctrines, one of them that we didn't really touch on is you prove your allegiance to the group by publicly showing outrage toward the evil ones, the oppressors. So there is that.
So silence is like they notice if you don't yell about Trump or something.
Well, you're supposed to. Silence is violence.
Right.
So it also just means that you're not one of us.
Right.
So that is part of the doctrine, is to call people out publicly with outrage. So that's part of it. But yeah, that, there's all kinds, and I'm actually still thinking through the details of it, why I would call it a cult, but you've been helpful with all of the list. Well, I actually have a copy of that.
Yeah, and you can listen to what Keri and I said this morning, but because we went through the other part of the list, but when you're done with this, I think it'd be great also to have you back and kind of get your conclusions about how this really shapes up and what you really think about now that you've had time to analyze it. So
yeah, and I really do need to analyze why Christians are swapping out their faith for this, or thinking that trying to merge it. Sure. And I haven't totally worked that out yet, but once I do, I'll let you know.
I don't know if this is because of my fundamentalist roots or not, but I think that most people of most religions are, I'll use a phrase that the Mormons use. Most people are Jack Mormons, right? They're like, they go on Sunday, but it's a cultural thing more than something that's really a deeply held belief that guides their lives. And so contradictions don't matter to them mostly, right? That's just a high level kind of my attitude about it generally. But who knows? Yeah. So.
Well, the Christians that I've been involved with are hyperactive on the social justice, and so I have to analyze this because they think they're Christians doing justice, but I think they're doing Christianity from a social justice lens, and I have to figure this out. So I'm working on it.
Yeah. Well, that will also be fascinating to talk about. So thank you again for coming in. Sorry that we had technical troubles this morning, but I'm glad we were able to have this conversation.
Thanks for having me. Yeah. I wish I was there, but I'm glad that we got to catch up and do it here.
Sure, yeah, and we'll have Keri on next time. Hopefully we won't have technical problems with Keri, and we'll definitely have you back for more stuff. So
yes.
Thanks again, Gracie. Have a good evening, and we'll talk later.
Thanks. Bye.